Evening, dear listener. What a privilege to come your way again with today's broadcast of Women in Ministry. We hope you're well. We hope you're safe by God's grace, and we hope you're settled wherever you are, whether you're in your car or at home, and ready to join in and discuss the nuggets that will be coming your way this evening. Um, in our last broadcast, we spoke about supporting our children's education, and we spoke broadly about ways of motivating your child, and the importance of education in your child's life, and how to merge that with our Christian faith and setting high expectations, and making sure that our children's learning is a continuous process. I mean, from a very young age, so that we can nurture them as they grow up. Today, we are going to look at supporting early years, which is preschool, reception, and primary school. So we're going to look at the tender ages, and how to best support our children's education from those ages before they hit secondary school, and then the teenage years start kicking in. And what a privilege once again to have with us Mr. Daniel Oseipoku. I believe if you listened to us during the last broadcast, you were blessed. And he is a vessel that God is going to use to speak to us once again today. Minister Audrey is on the line. She'll say hello very soon. And as the program goes on. But let's go on to Mr. Daniel Oseipoku, who spoke to us the last time. He's an assistant head. Daniel has over 14 years experience in teaching. He is an experienced teacher, and he is a man of God. So, beloved, we have a good blend here to speak into our lives and to deposit um, some wisdom into us. Amen. So, without much ado, I'll introduce my dear friend and brother Daniel Oseipoku to speak to us. We will be joined by Sylvia, who is the wife of Daniel, a woman of God, very blessed woman of God, who will join us later on during the broadcast. So, Daniel, you're welcome to Women in Ministry. Please feel comfortable and speak to us.
Thank you very much, Sister Eva and Minister Audrey, for inviting me again to talk to your listeners about supporting our children in education, or supporting our children's education, and going to focus on early years today. Um, Last time we spoke about, from a Christian perspective, some of the principles that we need to establish as parents to be able to support our children. Today, it's still going to be the same principles, but the focus is going to be on early years. Before we go into it from the educational point of view, we want to possibly look at it scripturally. So last time we looked at Proverbs 16:16, the ESV version, which says that how much better to acquire wisdom rather than gold, and to acquire understanding is more desirable than silver. And we established that as Christians, the first thing we need to do is to establish the basics, which is, or the foundation, which is actually helping our children know God, build a relationship with God. And then we moved on to look at certain principles around that biblically. Today, I want us to add another scripture to it. And this is a scripture from Jeremiah. The prophet Jeremiah, at this point, had been called by God. And as he's called by God, he's having an interaction with God. And he's almost making an excuse, um, and trying to find a reason why God is calling him. And God responds by saying in Jeremiah 1:5, before my shaping you in the belly, I knew you. And before your coming forth from out of the womb, I sanctified you. Prophet unto nations, I appointed you. So God is establishing here that before Jeremiah becomes a clot, before he is a zygote, before he is an embryo in the mother's womb, God had already predestined him. God knew him. He had purposed something for him. And then before his mother gives birth to him and he comes into this world, he sanctified him, he set him apart for a purpose. Yes, this is a case in point of a specific word to Jeremiah, but we can apply that. And I do strongly believe that as Christians, that before our children come into this world, God knows them. God knows every child. He has a plan for every child and is designed every child for a specific purpose. Every child is unique in their own way. And last time we spoke about the fact that no two children are the same. They are very, very different. And as parents, our role in this is that to help that child find that specific God-given purpose or assignment for that child. So if as parents, we can begin to look at that purpose, pray into it, and support the child in that right way, guide the child and train them so that the child can align themselves with the purpose of God, then we will help the children understand that specific plan. But we must believe that there is a plan for God to bring that child and a plan of good and a plan to bring that child to a perfect end. You know, in as much as we are able to help build them, it is also important that the relationship with God is so important. Now, the relationship with God starts from a young age. And that is what we want to focus on today. That's early years. When we talk about early years is from the ages 0 to 5 years. So right from birth to about 5 years. If you go into, well, technically you can go to up to key stage 1, but the foundation years of early years is 0 to 5 years. Then we will talk about primary school as well. Now, in terms of if you look at formal education in UK, early years start from the age 3. So from age 3, that is when formal education starts in the UK, or formal setting of education. So you know that some children or most children will have some time in preschool where they're given they have to go in to have some form of education or some form of learning in place. Now, these are principles I want us to talk about in terms of early years, because if we can understand, especially from that 0 to 3, let's say before they go in, 0 to 5 years, right from when they're given birth to, whilst they are at home, or it might be that because of work circumstances, that child needs to be put with a childminder or in a nursery. Then we will talk about it. Later, we will also talk about attachment theory and different things that go with it. So the first principle we want to talk about today is this, that every child is unique, who is constantly learning and can become resilient. So every child is unique, and the child is constantly learning and can become resilient. Now, when a child is born, the child is picking up so many things around them. What the parents are doing, how the parents are communicating. And it's just interesting to know that as parents, if we take some of these things for granted, so for example, how that child is picking up the way we are communicating. If we are waiting for the time the child speaks before we know how to speak properly to the child, then it will be too late. because the way you speak, the way you say words, let's say for I know we are all Christians, but if we're to lapse and use certain bad language, the next thing you know, that child is picking that up. If you're speaking to your husband or wife and you don't speak politely to them, that child is picking that up. So the way you are speaking, if that child has older siblings and you shouting at them all the time, or you're not showing love, or you're talking to them anyhow, that child is picking that up straight away. So the child is constantly picking things up. The brain is still developing, is being stimulating all the time. And the bit I like is that the child is capable of being resilient. Resilient, one of the best definitions of resilient I think I can give is that child, the ability to withstand storms or struggles when the going goes tough. So the next principle is that the child is children learn to be strong and independent through positive relationship. In a second, I'll speak about attachment theory. But one of the key things is that children learn to be strong and independent through positive relationship. A child who has strong relationship from that early stages, that child goes on to be strong, confident, and independent. And that's so true. If a child is given that opportunity to have the love from the parents, to have the love from adults around them, that child will grow on to be strong and independent. And we see that later on in life. So, for example, if you think about, let's say, a child that faces neglect at a very, let's say, even up to 6 months, that child, when they are older, will still suffer some of the consequences of that. That child will still go on in life and struggle in life because if there's no intervention put in place. Okay, so these are some of the principles that we need to be aware of. Children learn, the next principle is that children learn and develop well in enabling environments in which their experiences respond to their individual needs and there is strong partnership. So if we think about it, they learn where there is enabling environment. What does enabling environment mean? It means that there are the factors in place that supports them. Last time we spoke about, and we touch on that again, what can we provide at home? There is that smile, there is that positive encouragement. There is encouragement. Let's say a child is learning to walk and that child falls. You're not just going to tell that child that you are rubbish. You're going to encourage them. And that the same thing goes with their learning. If they're doing something, they're learning something and they're not able to pick it up, you build them up, you encourage them that they can go on, they'll be able to do it. And that helps them to develop that confidence and their individual needs. And later we talk about individual needs or needs in learning as well.
Well, Daniel, that's very interesting. Beloved, if you're listening to us right now, this is Women in Ministry. We are looking today at supporting early years and primary education. And we are live on Faith Channel Radio, Supreme Praise Radio, Channel of Mercy. We are also live on YouTube and on Facebook, Supreme Praise Radio. So please hook up with us and drop us a message. Text us what you're thinking. And I'm sure Daniel here and Sylvia will be able to answer them for you. So far, Daniel, you've said something which is a very unique blend and the core of our Christian faith, that believe there is a plan for your child, a good plan to build your child up to a perfect end. And I believe that hope and that security is quite imperative in parenting. Having that security that my child will do well. My child will do well. Also, you've spoken about the uniqueness of every child and the fact that children are constantly learning and become resilient. I think sometimes as adults, we stop learning. And because of that, we assume our children don't learn. And therefore, we demonstrate some habits that our children pick up without our knowledge. So that's a good one there to take note of if you're listening to us right now. Daniel, I'll get back to you. Please carry on.
So I did mention it is very true, Eva, what you spoke about there. It is there is a quote that states that children learn by what they see rather than what their parents tell them. So it means that as a parent, what the children see you do, they copy that more than what you are telling them to do. So if you are of the principle that do as I say, not what I do, then always you're going to struggle because your children are going to do the contrary. They would if they, for example, if you as a Christian, you're always telling your children to pray and they don't see you praying, they're not going to pray. If you're telling them to read the Bible and they're not seeing you read the Bible, your Bible, they're not going to do that. If you're telling your children to read books and they never see you read, they're going to struggle with that. In early years, and later we come to some of the factors in a second, but it is important also that to remember that some of these things that we are talking about, right from that young age, children are picking things up from what we are doing. That is why a parent will say something to a child, a 3-month-old child, and just be talking to the child. Why do we do that? We do that because we want the child to pick that up. Children do not lose that ability to copy from us. So they continue only to build that up. Now, I did mention the fact that the early stages of development is so important. And there is a theory in psychology and in education called the attachment theory. This is used to refer to the emotional relationship between a child or a baby and the people that the baby or the child spend most of the time with, who cares for the baby. It provides the baby with a comforting sense of security and safety. So from 6 months onwards, peaking to about 12 months and tailing off between the ages of 2 and 3, a baby would exhibit attachment behaviors. Now, last time I spoke about one of my, an aspect of my roles at school is working with children who are the most disadvantaged children. And a lot of time, some of these, although in their adolescent, and some even go on into their adulthood, to show that due to this attachment theory, the lack of care from their primary caregiver, the person who is supposed to be the primary caregiver. So let's say the mother or the father, the lack of care, that neglect or an abuse that a child might suffer, that child can go on in life and that would affect that child. There is also the strong evidence, published statistics that backs it up, that children that goes through these neglects or that attachment is broken at that young age tend to do less better in life compared to their peers. So it affects their achievement, It affects the outcomes in life. It affects their job prospects. And then later you can go on to link into mental health as well. So there is a whole contributing factor. If we can get it right as parents from that early stage, is showing love to the child, showing care to the child. And I'm going to throw this in that we are in a modern society, and I'm not here to talk about equality and so on and so forth, but we are in a modern society where we are all working and seeking for money and for material things. And I just want to throw this out there. When we decide to have children and when God blesses us with children, at some point we need to pause before the child comes into this world and decide on how the primary care is going to be given. Is there a need that one of the parents changing work pattern? Is there a need that one of the parents stopping to work, or both parents amending work patterns so that we are providing the care that a child needs in these foundation years? Yes, it might affect your career progression, whichever way we decide to go about it. But we also need to think about the fact that God has given us these children for a purpose. And I do strongly believe that so far as God blesses you with a child, you're going to be accountable towards that. Now, if we look at attachment, that child will always show desire for closeness to their primary attachment figure. So usually it's the mother, because if you think about naturally, when a mother is giving birth, that child is given to the mother. The mother holding the child close, and the child possibly taking early breast milk and sucking onto that, and the mother holding and cuddling. That is all part of the attachment that's being formed. When the child is feeling scared and the mother holds closely, that's part of the attachment being formed. So that sense of security is developing in that child over a period of time. Now, if you look at, for example, for the child in situations when the child is feeling anxious, if the attachment figure is not there, that anxiety is only going to increase. So if let's say whoever the attachment, the parents, if one of the parents is leaving or both parents are leaving and the child is left on their own, that child will cry and cry. Let's say a child's first day in nursery or with a childminder, they cry so much until they form an attachment with a childminder. So these attachment is so important over time. Now, the attachment figure can be formed with other people as well. So you have maybe grandparents, if grandparents are in the scene, or other aunties, uncles, or other family members or close friends who become almost like relatives to them. The child can form attachment with these. Now, why is attachment important for us as Christians? Why are we talking about attachment? We're talking about it because that there is now little doubt that the first 3 years of life shape a human's mental, emotional, and physical health for life. So the first 3 years is so important. Now, the third birthday is a milestone because the brain development is about 90% complete. Speech is established. Separation from the main carer becomes easier. And that's why, if you look at, for example, in the UK, at that age, preschool, there is that government funding for number of hours for everyone to go into. Some European countries go for later years, as you would expect with any psychological based research, there is always different ideologies there. But there is no doubt that that first few years of a child's development goes on to affect the later stages of that. So as Christians, what do we do? As Christians, what we need to do is that when we have a child, that those first 3 years, to provide them with all the support that we can provide them. Now, in education, what's the first thing we're going to have to think about is to then think about some principles that we can establish to support those children. So I'm going to look at 7 principles, and these 7 principles are based around the principles, it's the same principles actually that the government establishes for early years foundation stage. The first one is communication and language. To look at the communication and language of the child. If you think about it, for 3 years, language is established. So you are spending time talking to the child all the time. You're not giving the child, CBBC does not become the friend of the child, or Cartoon Network, or any of those, now that Netflix and all the other Disney Channel and those are not the friends of the child. Because sometimes it's easy, isn't it? Especially when you've got other children as well, that you've got the little one crying all the time, just give them the iPad or the tablet, and then you can get on with life. But communication and language is so important. You speaking to the child, you communicating with the child, and actually knowing how the child is communicating with you. Because that's when, if there is a speech impairment or speech delay or any signs of special needs, those are the stages you're going to pick up. The signs you pick up. Yes, it might be that some local authorities will wait for the child is about 5 years before they formally diagnose things, but there's no reason why interventions cannot be put in place, like speech therapy and so on and so forth, if you're picking things up. Preschool, at that age of 3 years, they will do a lot of assessment that should involve you, the parents as well. It's not just the responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of the nursery or the preschool or the setting for them to identify the child. You need to be involved as well as a parent. And then you have the personal, social, and emotional development. That is so important, that personal development, that social development. How does that child interact with other children? And that social development, sometimes you have to encourage the child if there are other siblings, and especially if the gap is a bit wider, encourage the other siblings to play with the child. You as parents, play with the child together. And I'm going to sound quite stereotypical here, but especially the men get involved with playing with the child. Especially if let's say the woman has given up work to stay home with the child. When you come home, remember that yes, you've done a hard day's work, but you are home as a father. So you don't come home and then expect that the woman that stayed home the whole day with a child then continues to support them. Remember that the same way you were working, she was also working at home. So when you come home, both of you team up together to spend time with the child. And then you have the emotional development. Now, emotional development, this is the key part. If you don't work on the emotional development of the child right from a young age, and the child throws tantrums and you accept that, the child says something and you accept that, you need to you need to get to the point where when you regulate, or you help the child regulate their emotions. So if something doesn't go their way, how do they respond to that? If something goes wrong, how do they make sure that they are able to regulate their emotions? Because if not, that child will grow to the age 5, so 7. By the time you realize they are in their adolescence and in their teens, and that's why a lot of secondary school children are like that, because they've not been corrected right from the beginning. Now we are going to be looking at we're going to be looking at just 4 academic areas, and I'm going to pause for any questions. So the 4 areas that we need to think about are literacy. So they're reading, and you hear me go on talk about literacy a lot more. So literacy, their reading, their writing. Literacy covers these areas: reading, writing, and oracy. So when we talk about literacy, there are 3 main areas of literacy: reading, writing, and oracy. Mathematics, understanding the world around them. So the world around them, taking them out, the environment, science, geography, all of that goes with the world around them. History, start teaching the child history that very young age. And then expressive arts, drawing, creating something, acting, all these different things. So those 4 specific areas, those are the areas that you need to focus on academically: their literacy, their mathematics, understanding the world around them, and then expressive arts and design.
Amazing. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Brother Daniel Opoku. Beloved, this is Women in Ministry, and we are in your homes, in your car, wherever you're listening to us from, with our wonderful guest, Mr. Daniel Opoku, with such a wonderful and a long experience in the teaching environment. So indeed, we are blessed this evening to have you. Beloved, you know that you can join in this discussion by calling our usual number 07389 80153. Please do get in touch with your answers, your concerns, because we've got Mr. Daniel Opoku to answer them all for you and Mr. Xavier Opoku alongside. So today we have 2 in 1 indeed for you and all your answers and your concerns. We are also live on Facebook, YouTube, Supreme Radio, Face Channel Radio, and Channel of Mercy. So indeed, tune in and stay tuned as you're being blessed. Thank you.
So as we have spoken about the attachment theory, we've spoken about principles in early years teaching. We have spoken about in terms of how do we support our children. And then we are also, we've spoken about academically, how do we support that specific child. So we spoke about supporting them through literacy, supporting them mathematically, supporting them in numeracy, and then the world around them. And the last one was the expressive arts. How are we able to support them? It is important to remember that, for example, if you for a very young child, or let's say a child at the age of 5, coming up to that primary age, you're not going to be, in terms of your literacy, it will be you spending time to read to the child. Now, there are so many books that you can do. Now, last time I spoke about the fact that making use of your local library. Yes, libraries are not open at the moment, But if you look at, there are a lot of online free libraries that you can use during this lockdown. If you are in UK, there are some or worldwide. The Gutenberg.org is a very good one that you can just go on their free online book. I think they've got over either 6,000 or 60,000 books that you can just download to read. So there are lots of resources out there that you can read with your child, age appropriate. In terms of mathematics, how do you go about it? It's about just talking to the child. Children learn by you, so by copying you. So right at the early stage, doing the counting with them, doing some mental maths with them, adding things with them. If you are at home and let's say fruits, you can ask the child to count how many apples or how many bananas or how many clementines or oranges you've got, so that child start doing that. And as they get older, adding them. As they get older, when you go to shop, you can ask them counting different things, exploring different things in terms of the world around them. In exploring the world around them, take them outside, walking through the woods or walking through, going to museums, going to the zoo, going to different places, local farms, to look at animals, be exposed to animals and talk about different animals. Get books, non-fictional books as well for them to read. And then the creative arts, allow them to express themselves. Allow them to draw, allow them to act. If they can join groups that would help them in that sense, if they've got a lot of interest in that, encourage them to do that. Now, as they get older through primary schools, and this is the bit I'm just going to run through the primary stages. So you've got at the age of 5, one thing you need to remember is at this point, everything I'm going to talk about will refer more to the UK educational system than any other system. And I guess other countries will have similar approaches. If it's very different and I'm aware of, I'll mention that. So the UK system is such that once they start that formal education, 3 to 5, they're going to be assessed, and then they will have that age appropriateness in terms of the stages that I spoke about earlier on. So their communication, their physical development, their personal, social, and emotional development, their literacy, mathematics, understanding the world around it, expressive arts. They would always tell you at the end of every year where the child is. Some very good primary schools nurseries or preschools would have a bit more regular information for you than by the end of the year. When the child starts reception, by the end of reception, they will be assessed as well, and that will be communicated to you. When the child is in year 1, at the end of year 1, again, there will be another assessment, and that's where they will do a lot of the spelling assessments, and again, they will communicate to you how well they are performing in terms of their age appropriateness. At the end of year 2, then you will do the key stage 1 exams. So the child will sit a formal exam. So if you think about it, there are a lot of arguments educationally whether there is a benefit in children doing exams that early or not. But as the system stands now, whether we like it or not, there is a formal education from that. Now, if your child is in year 2, right now, my suggestion is have a look at the .gov.uk website, and there are examples of test papers so that you have an idea what a child, in terms of reading, the quality of reading the child is expected to do, and set a comprehension exams on there, and there is the GPS, so grammar, punctuation, and spelling test as well, and then they will do the maths test as well. Once the child has done that, the child then go to key stage 2, which starts from year 3. So key stage 2 is from year 3 to year 6. Now, at that point, year 3, they'll follow the key stage 3 curriculum. There isn't any exams until the child is in key stage at the end of key stage 2. So until the child is in year 6. Now, at the end of year 6, then they will sit the year 6, the key stage 2 exams. Again, key stage 2 exams is quite similar in terms of format and to the key stage 1 exams, but the only difference is more challenging. And actually, the key stage 2 exams has become more challenging in recent years than previously it's used to be. So if you compare, I think in the last 4 years, it's become more challenging than it used to be. And that is as a result of obviously UK government increasing the demand in our curriculum offer. In that exams is the same. It's only English and maths exams. There isn't any science exams. Science exams is teacher assessment. So there isn't a national science exams. The exams, you have the reading parts, you have the writing, reading and writing, and then you have the GPS, which is the grammar, punctuation, and spelling. And then again, the same website, there are examples on there, and there is the maths exams. Now, if you are in certain counties, remember at the end of year 6, you're preparing for secondary schools. Now, generally, secondary school is such that you go into your local secondary school, what we refer to as your catchment secondary school. So you apply for secondary school places, and then the office comes in, I think, around about March or so. Now, depending on which county you are in, some counties have the old 11 plus. Now, 11 plus used to be, I think, possibly in the 50s. So it used to be quite wider than you've got now. But at a certain point, Labour government, there was a Labour government that decided that, it wasn't a fair way of testing children at that age, and some counties got rid of, or in some boroughs got rid of their 11 plus schools, what we call the grammar schools. But some counties and boroughs still have them. Now, the most common 11 plus exam boards that there are, you have our local one in Essex, if you live in Essex or close to Essex, the Southend ones and the Essex ones, you got the CSE, which is the Consortium of Schools of Essex exam board, and then you've got the CEM, which is possibly the largest one because a lot of the Kent grammar schools, Midlands grammar schools all follow that. Now, that exam board recently has been taken over by GL Assessment. GL Assessment is one of the largest assessment companies. They've been running assessments. So if you have children that go to private schools, independent schools, they will be aware of things like the midges and yearlies and these or CATs and so on. A lot of those assessments are run by that. Now, just briefly on 11 plus, what's the difference between 11 plus and Key Stage 2 exams? Are they the same? Can you use the same preparation for that? My answer to it is no. 11 plus, as the name is for children at the end of year 5 who are above their average. So at the end of year 5, children who are above average. So if you've got a child that is on average, then possibly 11 plus might not be the right approach. I'm not saying that it is not. I am saying it might not be. How do you know it's the right approach? It's about speaking to the class teacher of that child. Now, some parents, and I think for 11 plus, you need to make sure that you're putting support in place to help the child. You have to put support in place to help the child. Where does the support mean? Does the support mean that actually having a tutor for the child also? That's entirely up to you as the parent. That's not the point. But it's about right from that early stages. If you think that you're going to want your child to sit the 11 plus exam, then from early stages doing some work with the child. And there are going to be so many resources. There are so many resources out there that you can use to support the child. As the child gets close to it, 11 plus most 11 plus is set at the beginning of year 6, and that is why you start the preparation early, because whereas SATs is set towards the end of year 6, 11 plus is at the beginning of the year 6, so the child has to be ready for it. So that's how you've got to be looking at it. All right. And having that support in place for the child. How do you decide? If you look at UK, largely you've got 3 systems for secondary school. You've got a comprehensive school, the state comprehensive, which is if you like, the mainstream school. You get into comprehensive schools, most comprehensive schools, I must say, through catchment area. Although you do have some comprehensive schools that will have a stream aspect, which means that, or a selective aspect. So it means that they will have some selectiveness. People who live outside their catchment area sit some exams and can get into that. And then you have the grammar schools, which is purely by selective. So those ones, you sit 11 plus, and as you sit 11 plus, those who will pass the exams go into that. Then you have the independent schools. Now, the independent schools, there are 2 categories of independent schools. There are independent schools, all independent schools you pay to get into, not unless you get a scholarship to get into that. Now, some independent schools is by the fact that you can afford it, and then you pay to get into. Some independent schools, you might be able to afford it, but it's so selective. And there are a lot of selective independent schools in the UK. So some of the popular ones that you can think about, Eton, Brighton College, Tunbridge Wells, the top ones, or you can think about, they're all selective. So although you can afford it, some of them work out to be about 40 or so thousand a year, but you need to think about it. All independent schools, even the selective ones, do offer scholarship as well. So if you've got, you need to read about it. Some offer scholarship based on academics. So if the child is exceptional, and they said the exam and does well, then they might be able to offer scholarship. That is also based on your income. If you've got, your income is a bit lower. So if you've got a child who is very bright and your income is a bit lower, and you think that that child can look into that, then certainly look into that. My advice to anyone looking at independent schools is that you need to start looking at it early enough. I would say by the time the child is in year 3 or 4, start looking into it, because some of them, there are exams that are different stages of the exam. So if you wait till year 5, it might be too late. Some of them, I know you need to register your interest at the when the child is in year 4 for the exam later on. So you need to be aware of that. Some independent schools allow scholarship or offer scholarship based on the creative arts and performance as well. And then you have independent schools that will offer scholarship based on sports. So look at the talent and the ability your child has got and use all of that to inform you.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much. That is a lot of information, useful information out there. Dear listener, we hope you're being blessed, and it's quite helpful to know, how to select schools for our children, because sometimes you find other parents taking their children to a particular school, and can I say, am I right in saying that because a school is an independent school does not make it better than a comprehensive school? So you as a parent need to know what you want for your child, so that you know what school to choose for your child, and not just follow, a status quo and put your child in a wrong school.
Just on the selection of school or choosing school, I think we've got to be very careful. A lot of times when parents are choosing schools, they just use the information available to the public, which is right to do so. So some parents will base it on Ofsted reports. Now, can I just say that Ofsted reports is just a measurement? It doesn't always give the total, if you like, the total information or the total what the school really looks like. It only captures some aspects of the school. Another information you can also look like is the performance of the school. Now, the performance of the school, now you've got to be very careful using league tables, because now performance look at the progress students make when they join the school overall. Now, overall progress might be good, which is fine, but that doesn't mean that maybe your child going into another school, that child is not going to perform well. It doesn't mean that every child that goes to that school performs better. An average can mean that if you look at GCSE grade, a child is expected to get a grade 3. That child gets a grade 4. That's good. If you pick another school, that child goes there and the child is expected to get a 4, and that child gets a 4, the overall progress will be affected because they haven't got better. So you've got to be really careful how you interpret my suggestion always to any parent going into schools, there are two things. Look at the Ofsted report. If it's, let's say, the school requires improvement, why is the school requires improvement? Read the report. If you don't understand the report, ask someone in education that you know, this is the report, what's that telling you? Because reasons why schools are put in requires improvement, or for example, schools are put in inadequate or special measures, there's so many reasons for that. You could have a reason such as let's say, safeguarding issue. All right. If Ofsted counts for a report and there was count for an inspection and there was a safeguarding issue, then it means that it does not matter how well the school performs or the academics of the school is already in a category.
Yeah.
So you need to get someone to help you interpret that data. And then the next one is the progress as well. But the most important data, I think, as a parent, you need to have is that speaking to someone or a parent whose child goes to the school. And that gives you much more information than any other thing. Of course, you want your child to go to a good school. Of course, you want your child to go to a school that performs very well academically. But I think you need all these other information. The last bit of information is that also
we've got a question coming in. So we've got a question coming. So after you've landed, we'll read that out.
The last bit of information is that if you've got a child who needs support, special educational needs, then look how good the special educational needs support system is in the school. Special educational need and disability support is in the school. If that is not strong enough, then you ought to know that that's not the right school for the child.
We've got a question coming in, Daniel. It says, at what point do you prepare your child for grammar school? And as a parent, do you decide to let your child go to grammar school? Do you make that decision? Or do you find out from the child if they want to go to grammar school? If they feel like, they're up for it. So
I think there are two folds on that. At what point do you decide that your child is going to grammar school? I would say that the first point is that, one, right at the beginning, grammar school preparation, you start building the foundation, I would say. You start building the foundation with a child. So gradually chipping away. And that's why, the first thing I think you have a child, once the child starts school, is your first thing you have a child really, because the child is going to go to school at some point. Start making a decision. Do I want my child to be in the independent sector or the state sector? That's the first question. If you can afford independent sector and that's the route you want to take, then you start looking into the different independent sector. If you want your child to go into the state sector and you think that secondary school, I'll possibly consider grammar school, then you start looking into it. Now, one thing about preparation for grammar school is that I'm not talking about preparation as in having a tutor for the child right from the beginning, because that's not always the best. You've got to decide what is right for you as a family and financially and everything else. It can be that you investigate which exam board that the grammar schools in your area sit. Once you investigate that, you start looking at the resources that are available. And there are a plethora of resources available that you could investigate in, even from reception, because it's not going to be like the child is in reception and is doing year 5 work. That's not the case. It will still be the reception work, but then the resources for that gears towards grammar are such that it builds them up gradually. So you start looking into that, and then you do that work with your child at home. So as part of the support you give in your child, you're doing that. Now, so you continue to do that. And of course, as the child gets to year 3, year 4, you intensify that. How do you make the decision? You make that decision by talking to your child's teacher. Is it the child's own choice? And I'm going to go back to the first, my interpretation to the first scripture, the Jeremiah 1:5. God has a purpose for the child, and you as a parent is to support the child in finding that purpose. So you need to ask yourself, do you force your child to sit 11 plus or not? I think it's a discussion you have to come to with your child. I really do think so. Now, how do you come to that decision with your child? I'm not saying that leave that decision to the child to make.
It has to be a discussion.
A discussion, as in you explaining to the child why this might be good for them. That's what I'm talking about. Why this choice might be good for them. Because it's about opportunities, isn't it? It's the same way if you decide, if you can afford or if there was a scholarship for your child to go to an independent school, the same decision is the opportunities you are presenting to the child. If you're taking your child on holiday to another part of Europe and they didn't want to go, would you leave them at home?
No.
Because it's about building their culture capital and exposing them. If you go into the museum and your child didn't want to go, would you, so it's about that. Now, if you've got a child that you think that, yes, they are bright, but grammar might not be right for them. I know people, because of where we live, that the grammar system, people who did not chose not to go to grammar school and possibly passed their grammar exams and didn't go to them and gone to comprehensive schools and have gone on to do well. Now, my school is a comprehensive school. We've got people that have come to our school right from year 7 to 6th form, gone to Cambridge, Oxford, to study and do well. And there are schools like that all over UK that people have gone to. The same way wherever you are in the world, people would go to, in quotes, less advantageous or less, not the very top schools, but still be successful in life. But I think it's a discussion you have with your child if that is the right opportunity, or the right door you're opening for them. I don't think it's just about saying to them, do you want to do it or not, without explaining.
And to be very stereotypical, especially with the boys, you have to give them a bit of a push to get that achievement out of them, isn't it? God help us. Parenting is a call. Parenting is a calling. You don't just have children. You have to be prepared to put in the work. Yeah. And the Lord will strengthen us. Amen.
Amen.
Daniel, please, I had a question.
Yes.
Earlier on, during your presentation about personal, social, and emotional development. Sometimes as parents, when our children demonstrate some behaviors, especially in their toddler stages, we say to ourselves that, oh, I'm like that. So, and sometimes we overlook it. So sometimes when a child is not speaking appropriately, or it is not hitting the development points for speech, some of the parents will say, oh, I didn't speak very much earlier on in my development. So, and sometimes you have the tendency to just leave the child instead of intervening and making sure the child hits that development stage. What do you have to say about that?
There are two fronts to that. Let's just look at the behavior side before we go to possibly the need side. So if we look at the behavior side, if a child is demonstrating a behavior that you as a parent, you possibly demonstrated as a child, let's say anger. If you're quick-tempered and right at a young age, you can see that quick-temperedness in your child. What do? Do you just say that I'm quick-tempered, so I'm going to leave that short-temperedness in my child? My argument around that is, you think about it as an adult and through your childhood, was that always the best thing for you? If not, your responsibility as a parent, and let's remember that what I said last week, the fact that, and you mentioned that earlier, parenting is not easy. Now, Proverbs 16:16 says that, how much better is it to acquire wisdom rather than gold, and acquire understanding is more desirable than silver. So our job is that in terms of bringing up the children, we have to help them acquire understanding. If I saw that behavior in myself and it's not good, do I leave my child to go through the same thing? No, I'll correct that child right from the beginning. And going back to our scripture, train up a child the way you should go. Training involves hard work. So we've got to put in that hard work. And I believe that. I strongly believe that you as a parent put in that hard work. My desire as a parent, as a father, is that my children will not make the mistakes I made. And I pray that to all our listeners, may our children not make the mistakes we made. May our children be better than ourselves.
Amen.
So if we want our children to be better than ourselves, then the faults in us or our weaknesses, we pray and hope that our children are not going to have those weaknesses. So if they start demonstrating that, then we've got to work with them. We've got to support them. We've got to be able to become better, to improve. You think about that if as any trainer or any trainer or coach wants them to the players also to be better than themselves. Now, if you think about, let me pick Messi as an example. Now the coach of Messi, either at Barcelona or the Argentine coach, they're not better footballers than Messi.
Yeah.
But they will work on his weaknesses to improve. Or Ronaldo. They work on their weaknesses to improve them, for them to become better for themselves and for the team as well. And that's what we need to do as parents. Now, if you think about the need side of things, there is an argument for, and I do get that, let's say, when it comes to speech, if you had a delayed speech and then you could argue that I had delayed speech and I was fine later. If you're a Christian and you are saying that, you say that with faith and you pray into that if you see that in your child. And I really strongly believe that as a parent and as a Christian, if you see any need, I'm not saying that special need is something we have to demonize or anything like that. But if you see anything like that, we need to pray into it. And if you have faith and you want to go with it, that's absolutely fine. But that is not to say that if there is a need, you are not going to seek for intervention. The earlier intervention you seek, the better. As you pray and you seek intervention, the better it will be. Sometimes, as Christians, what we are likely to do is that because of our faith, we will not seek intervention early. And we would, excuse me to say, especially if you're from minority ethnic background as well, you might even use that as an excuse that my child is being picked on or my child is not getting the support they need, rather than actually having it investigated. We just delay it, and that goes on to affect the child.
Well, someone had a question, but the person has texted that you've answered the question in this submission. So thank you so much, and God bless you. Right. I had another question in your earlier presentation. Let's talk about numeracy. What are some of the best ways to teach our young children numeracy?
I say numeracy is quite an interesting one, because I remember having a conversation with the parents, and the parent stating to me that that parent was very good in maths when they were at school, but they're not able to support their child because the methods of teaching have changed. Now, I know that you are a mathematician and you are a professional maths teacher as well. So my advice is that if you had the kind of education I had, which is some of the very rudimentary methods of maths, I don't think that's wrong. I think in a lot of ways, the methods of learning have not changed as much. And there is also an argument that one of the very big debates in education, and it's been going for some time now, is that traditional method of teaching versus progressive methods of teaching. Now, traditional methods of teaching would be the sort of teaching that if you went to the schools I went to, you would have experienced. The teacher stood in front of you and gave you the information, and you learned it and you repeated it, and you did a lot of recalling, and there was a few application. Whereas the progressive method is by you learn by doing. I think it is mostly about the traditional with some progressiveness as well. In that the traditional, as in the fact that you learning continuously works. An expert giving you information works. And then the last thing is that by the child doing it also works. So what I'll suggest is that you, the parent, teaching the child mental, let's say, times table. Teach the child how to do the times table. Now, one of the things I was quite surprised when I started teaching in some of the methods in teaching here is that times table used to be that they just count on 2, 4, 6. Then you ask the child what is 2 times 8, and the child has to take time. Now, I am a strong believer in, and I'll play my cards here, the Ghanaian method of 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, because if you ask 2, 5, you know what that means.
Yes.
And it works. So I suggest people use those rudimentary traditional methods, memorizing things, recalling things, and then repetition. And now there is a lot of research, metacognitive research, that backs up that memorizing, recalling really works.
Well, over to you, parents. So no more excuse that, well, I didn't do secondary education here, I didn't do primary education here, so I can't teach my child. Teach them what you know. Teach them what you know, and when they go to school, they will build up on it. Minister Audrey has a question, so we'll give her, we'll pass it on to her to ask her question.
All right.
Thank you, Sister Eva. Brother Daniel, this is so amazing. It is wonderful to be educated in such a manner. And I like when you said that we are accountable for the children that God gave to us. And many a times, it's not the fault of the parents, but they believe that they're doing good for their children. They're fighting a good fight. And that is where we missed a lot of things for our children in terms of learning difficulties. And it's something that I've noticed, and I say this with a very huge respect in the ethnic minorities and also in the believers, that many a times we demonize these kind of things. When a teacher kindly express a concern about your child, instead of seeking intervention early, we tend to blame the devil. But that is not the issue. The issue is for us to listen to what the teacher is saying. Seek that early intervention to assist that child from that early stage. So when they grow, learning becomes much easier. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child is disabled. And I was so glad when you stressed on that part, because learning difficulties simply means that the child is an individual and learns differently.
That's right.
There are doctors, lawyers, and ministers out there who had learning difficulties as children, and their parents accepted that, seek early intervention, and look at where they are now.
Yeah.
So I was so glad, and I say to the parents out there listening to us this evening that we pray, we are believers, we know God is able to do it, but we should also use the wisdom that God gives us in James that says that when you need wisdom, ask, because it's part of this wisdom that would help us bring these children up in the will of God. And that does not take away the fact that the child needs extra help to do maths. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with the child. It means that the child learns differently.
Yeah.
The children out there that work so well with the Ghanaian 212-224, it's so much easier for them. There are others who would do 224, 228, all different. They do it differently. So it gladdened my heart when you stressed on that. And I pray that our listeners will understand that we pray and we believe in our prayers. But when there's a need for an intervention, take that advice, educate yourself, and step into that available space for that intervention to be put in place for that child.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. One point I was going to make in that, and that this might be contentious. So if you lose listeners over this, I do apologize. But if you think about last summer where we had the Black Lives Matter movement and people were on the streets, one of the things that were highly spoken about was education. The equality in education was highlighted, which the evidence does not support. Now, if you look at the age of 16, so GCSE, achievement and progress, then in terms of by ethnicity, you could argue that ethnic minorities outperform whites English. And of course, you can strip the white English and then you can go to those who are from middle income to high income background, and those from disadvantaged backgrounds perform poorly. So that is there. However, if you look at it of raw ethnicity, now, if you look at it, let's say for blacks, those from African background outperform whites. The only groups that outperform those are Asians and Chinese, so Southeastern Asians and Chinese. Now, one thing is that if you look at the Chinese, those of Chinese heritage and Southeastern heritage, a lot of them still use their traditional methods of learning, and especially at home to help them learn. And they don't, when it comes to academics and a lot of things, they don't use their race as an excuse not to perform. You know, and I think sometimes we need to be frank about it, that there are lots of our children, and especially those from African background who are performing well, working hard, you know, to do well. And I know that sometimes the media uses the instances to highlight, and yes, everywhere you go, there'll be inequalities and so on and so forth. But there are also people working hard to do well. And I stated this in the last session, that the best opportunity we can give our children is by providing them with a platform, with the resources that we are able to, where those who are of affluent backgrounds provide their children. Yes, you might not be able to take your child to every single holiday, but you can provide some holidays in the UK. Yes, you might not be able to buy every book for your child, but you can use free resources to support your child. So let's do our best as parents, and especially as Christians. And I think the area of special needs come to mind. Yes, you pray about it, and I do believe in prayer, and I do believe that if there is a disability or need, and the way you want God to work it, God answers prayers. But we also need to realize that educationally we can't provide support for the child. And as Minister Audrey said, that are so many people that have gone on to be successful with disability, with special needs. So far as there is the support for them. Your child might not be good in maths, but they might be the best sports person. Mo Farah's achievement, he did not become Sir Mo Farah because of being a mathematical genius. Marcus Rashford has not got an MBA for being the best historian. His MBA did not come from that. It's just being a footballer and using his influence to make impact. So it's important that when you are measuring what your child can do, you're looking at your child as an individual, not what society expects or what family expects or what background expects or what the media is telling you. But look at your child as an individual. Allow them to fulfill their potential. The people that have achieved great things through academics, and that's fantastic. And we have to support our children that way, because stating all those previous examples, yet one of the easiest way to cause social mobility and economic mobility is through education. It's still the best way ever to do that. And it's once you're educated, no one can take that from you. No one.
Wow. I've not even checked the time, and we've gone way, way over our time. And no listener has texted so far to say, Eva, you've gone over your time. They must be enjoying this broadcast. Thank you so much, Daniel. I think one point that you've really highlighted is the area of primary caregiving. Because I tell you what, there's a bit of contention. I don't think a lot of conversation is had around primary caregiving and how lives are going to change, how the marriage is going to change to accommodate for the new life that's being brought into the world. To be honest, I certainly didn't think my life would change that much before I had my first child. I had to learn on the job. So I think we need to talk more, think, about what and how we're going to support our children, because they need that support. If you don't have time for your child, please don't expect your child's teacher to have that time. If you cannot teach your child to write, if you can't buy your child a pack of crayons, please don't expect the child to turn up in preschool and say, oh, that's not a good school. So, dear parents, we need to give our children that attention, so that it will pay off. And just as Daniel said, let's not put our children in front of CBBS all day. All right, those are pre-recorded programs. Let's have personal interactions with our children. Let's watch how they turn their tongue, how they look, how they roll their eyes, give them a bit of critical attention so we can spot their development and make sure that we are doing our role, we are playing our part in God's good plan for their lives. I think this session is for Minister Audrey. Minister Audrey, I'm so sorry. Please speak. Minister Audrey, are you with me? Can you hear us at all? All right, I'll just go on then. So, Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the insight you have poured into us. May the Lord richly bless you and enlarge your territory. And I pray that the Lord will cause you to shine brighter and brighter and be a source of inspiration as you go along to many, many, many more parents. And beloved listener, this is Women in Ministry. This is a ministry. This is not just a broadcast. We want the Lord to transform your lives through us. And just as the Lord transforms mine, I pray that He touches you to make those decisions with regards to your calling as a parent, as a wife, and your calling to your society as well. So we can do it. We are Deborahs. We can do it. We can take it on. So I pray that as you go through this week, please share the link. If you've listened to us on YouTube or Facebook, please share it, pass it on to someone. I know that there are quite a few young mothers who will benefit from this broadcast. So please pass it on, let someone listen and be blessed. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us. Text us, call us on 0730-898-0156, and you will have someone speaking to you to give you counsel, to say a prayer with you concerning any decisions that needs to be made. Minister Audrey, I think you're back with us. Can you do the conclusion then?
We thank God for such a time in its presence, I would say, to be educated in this manner. As we have spent much of our time, we would be gladly to close and leave
All right. Praise the Lord. Sorry about that, dear listeners. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. God richly bless you. And Daniel, thank you so much. Just to let you know that there will be a repeat broadcast next week, Sunday, same time. And you can listen again on YouTube, on Facebook, on demand as well. Our next live broadcast will be on the 21st of March, and we'll be looking at entrepreneurship. Please don't miss this broadcast. Okay, don't miss it. Gather your friends around and let's march on. 2021 is going to be an awesome year. It doesn't matter what is happening around us. We are marching forward. Okay, we are redeeming the times, and the Lord is with us. So till we come your way again, have a blessed week from me and Minister Audrey. Stay safe and God bless you.
Praise Radio, your cosmopolitan Christian radio